Welcome to the Enter the Mind podcast.
The most real talk, no nonsense podcast on the empowering of the mind.
Why enter the mind? Because it's that room in your house that's been there all along that you've never gone into.
Well, now it's time to enter with two mind coaches dedicated to self-help and the thriving of all human beings.
I'm Kyra Carlin.
And I'm Robert Nelson.
Welcome to Enter the Mind.
Today's episode, we're going to be talking about childhood. Before we get to that, Kyra, how's it going?
Going so good. I'm getting a kitty. Woo!
A new pet.
What'd you say?
Kitty cat, new pet.
Kitty cat. Yes, I'm getting a sweet little kitten, and I'm going to love her with all of my heart, and I'm going to name her after a Greek god. So, Greek goddess. But
have you figured out which one?
I have a few in mind, but I've none that I can remember. I kind of just screenshotted them last night.
Nice. I like those names. They're very, they get us in touch. You know, the names of Greek gods, in mythology, it gets us in touch with our higher selves, I think, and our potential, right? So.
Agreed.
Yeah. Well, I had an exciting day yesterday because I finally put together a compilation of my skateboarding footage, and I put it to music, and it's so dope. I grew up watching that stuff on VHS tapes. You know, the pros, Rick McCrank, Andrew Reynolds, the old school guys, and street skaters, and Jamie Thomas. Yeah, so I don't know. It's just very exciting. It makes you think about, at least from a psychology perspective, the level of excitement that I experienced, to kind of wonder where does that energy come from and where it's stored up for so many years, because I wanted to create the clip, right? I always wanted to make my own skate video, and I never did. And finally doing it yesterday, you have to wonder what's going on at the level of energy there, right? So much energy is stored up over the years, and then it's suddenly released by taking an action and doing what you wanted to do. So
gaining momentum.
Yeah. All right. So today's topic, I wanted to talk about childhood, and not exactly because skateboarding was a part of my childhood, but actually because I ran into this song again yesterday, and this song is called, it's in Spanish, so it's kind of weird. It's called Residente. It's sort of like if you imagine the word resident, right? Like resident, but then with an E at the end. So in Spanish, it's pronounced Residente. And it's by this guy named Rene, just R-E-N-E. He was in a group called Calle 13, and I don't know if they're still making music, but in any case, he's like a rapper from Puerto Rico, I think. And he made this song called Residente that is extremely moving, very touching, a very touching song, very deep. And it's about his childhood. And so I want to read some of the lines here. I'll read them, the English translations, of course, and then we can discuss them. So the music video is amazing. It's filmed on a baseball field. And so he's talking about when he used to play baseball when he was young. All right, so I'll skip around, but here's some of the lyrics. I grew up with Christopher, my friend. We threw rocks together. We broke a couple windows. We ran down the street shirtless in the fields of Trujillo, downhill by bike with a plastic cup on the spokes so it sounded like a car. No one stopped us. We were inseparable until one day he was killed by 4 policemen. My joy is still broken. The lights went out in the ballpark. There's hardly anyone left here. Let me jump ahead. So then he says, I want to go back to when my windows were sunny and the heat woke me up, when they called me to play, meaning like when my friends called me to go play, to when I rapped for free. I want to take the baseball cards out of the container, steal second base again. In summer, at Christmas, cleaning the house with my brothers. I want to go back to the movies in the week and to get to art school in the morning. I want to stay there. I don't want to leave there. I want to go back when they wouldn't let me in because I dressed poorly. I want to go back to feeling when I didn't have to pretend. I want to be me again. So I don't know if any of those lyrics impacted you, but did you have any thoughts?
I think the biggest thought literally was that last line. It said, "I want to be me again," and I think that there's a fine line between, because it's like children, they have so much non-judgment against themselves. Like they think they're just absolutely great. They're like, I'm amazing. You know, I can run down the street shirtless with my boy, you know? But like, there's also a fine line, because it's like you know, you grow up, you know, it's not that you're not still yourself. I think that you just have this idea because you're grown up now, and yeah, we've kind of learned not to do specific things, and you're still yourself, but maybe just bring those things back from childhood, you know, your freedom, your thinking that you're great, you're meeting up with a friend on a Thursday evening or a Friday evening just to run down the street shirtless, you know, just to start doing those little things again that you actually really, really loved when you were a kid, that we stopped doing, I guess, now because we're adults. And that's what hit me.
Yeah, I mean, especially with the holidays coming up, kids, I feel like sort of the excitement that we felt as kids around the holidays gets replaced by responsibilities as an adult. Like, oh, I have to go do the Christmas shopping. I have to, you know, I have enough money to go Christmas shopping and all of that, you know. And I don't know what it is. Vacations even seemed more enjoyable as a kid, and probably in part because as a kid you don't have to organize anything. You don't have to, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But as an adult, you got to buy the plane tickets. You got to time it right. Make sure you get to the airport early. You have to do all of this stuff. But I don't know. But there's still adults who enjoy life. Like it's not. But I hold that as like the ideal. Like that's how things should be. I never understood the idea of miserable adults growing up. Really, it was confusing to me. I thought, you know, how is it that these adults are not enjoying life and they have more freedoms and can do what they want, and I'm just a kid. I have to do what my parents tell me.
I think that there's a big difference between, so like miserable adults, right? So it's like you're miserable because you have taken into your life everyone else's perception and beliefs of what an adult should be, or you feel like you kind of put it all on yourself if you're a miserable adult, because, you know, say as an adult you want to play a board game, right? But you don't, because you're like, oh, well, adults don't do that, or oh, that's a waste of my time. Okay, well, you're putting that completely on yourself. Personally, I believe that. And I think that the essence of bringing back your childhood, I guess, beliefs back into your system, you know, clearly would only harm you if you were to go back to your childhood beliefs, because we didn't know anything. We didn't know how to earn money. We didn't know how to book a plane ticket, you know. So there are some things that we need as an adult, but when you're an unhappy adult or you're a miserable adult and you think, oh, life was so easy when I was younger, okay, great, well, you're at a great start. So what is that going to lead you to do? Are you going to unlearn how to live? No. You're going to just take the things that you remember from being a child and you can implement the ones in your life today that actually, you know, won't harm you today. Like, you're not going to unlearn business school, but maybe you can unlearn becoming quiet in social situations. Maybe you can unlearn that, and you can learn to step forward like you did when you were a kid and be like, I love those shoes. You know, a little kid would be like, shoes, I love them. So yeah.
It's funny. That reminds me of like improvisation class. I took an improvisation class a couple years ago. It was like 8 weeks long, and
Ooh.
it was really funny to see all of these adults like struggle so much to be present to the moment and to say exactly what impulsively comes to their mind. It's the whole first 2 weeks were sort of a deconditioning of society. Um, you know, we would play these games where we get in a circle and you have to like say a word, and then the next person says a word. They say one of two words, but it has to depend on which word you said. And so it forces you to be fully present, because you have to be totally listening to what the person before you says. You can't have your little speech planned ahead of time the way that we do when, you know, you're brand new to a meeting, and then they'll go, okay, well, let's go around the room, say your name and say something about yourself. And you spend the entire time thinking about what you're going to say and not listening to what other people have to say. But so this improvisation exercise forces you to be present to the moment. But what you witness is people struggling so much, and it gets to their turn and they're like, and they're like, and the teacher says, and then the teacher goes, you know, you're thinking too hard. You have to just say it. And if it's wrong, that's fine. That's what improvisation is. Right. It's more important to go with your gut and say something. I mean, imagine if you're doing like a long form improvisation where there's like a scene that you're doing an acting scene or whatever, and you guys are making it up from nothing. Like that forces you to be very present to the moment.
I love that, because one of the biggest things, even as a child, I'm not sure if this was totally something that I did or that other children did, but one of the biggest things that I've learned about like connection with people and communication with people is to stop thinking about all that you want to say when they're speaking. Just sort of listen to them. And then I like how you added in that like improvisation, because it's like, okay, well, we could be onto something, right? There could be you could try going through a whole day of your life with just improvisation, you know, and somebody says something and you say the first thing that relates to that to them, you know, and maybe see how it makes you feel. See if that can make you feel, I guess, a little bit more playful and young and free, kind of like a child is.
Right. Yeah, and there's so many opportunities to improvise, but yeah. Well, one story I want to share is similar to what we were talking about earlier, of like emotions and like the miserable adult, the concept of the miserable adult. One time I was vacationing. This is when I was a kid. We used to take a lot of road trips up to Wisconsin since I lived in Illinois. And in one of these road trips, I was probably like 8 years old or something. We pulled up to this antique store, and I noticed that in the minivan next to us, these were complete strangers. They were having some sort of argument, and there were like kids in the back, and then the two parents were in the front, and the father in this family had to get out of he had to get out of the driver's seat, open up the back door, and go back to, I guess, to like buckle in his kids or whatever, or to make them stop fighting. But he was furious. He was like, you kids gotta stop. Like you can imagine the scene, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking, even as young as I was, I remember thinking like, so this guy works so hard at his job to save up money to go on a vacation to this little vacation area in Wisconsin, brings his family, only to be miserable and have these anger outbursts at his own children. And I just thought, that's so absurd. This is so absurd how adult Homo sapiens are conducting themselves on this planet.
I love that story. And I want to talk about the positives and the negatives in that story because, it's almost like it's kind of helpful, not helpful. I'm not like promoting arguing in front of your kids all the time because they're going to learn that growing up. But I think it's okay to have, I guess, like a controlled argument in front of your kids, only to show them that, like, hi, like, me and your mom or me and your dad, we're very happy, but we disagree on things sometimes, just like everyone else does, right? So I think that can be a plus. I mean, unless you're doing it all the time, because then the kid is just gonna grow up to be like some argumentative motherfucker, right? But the negatives about this is that I feel like I've come to learn with kids that they do things mainly for attention. And I learned that okay, so like I guess I learned somewhere in my life that if I got hurt, then I would get attention. Or if I got in trouble, then I would finally get attention. I'd be like, yes, the attention I need. So I feel like kids, if they're acting up, dude, they're just trying to get your attention. Don't give them the attention. Let it pass. That energy is going to pass through them and they're going to be fine. But if you go back there and you give them attention and you yell at them, they're secretly inside bursting with excitement and success because they're like, I did it, So it's like, if your kid is running around the house and banging all the cabinets, great. Well, put in some headphones. Put in some goddamn headphones and let the kid be. She or he is going to run out of energy soon, and she's going to learn, or the child is going to learn that when they're acting like a complete fucking raging lunatic, that no, I'm not going to give you attention. So that way they can learn that when they do something good, that they can get attention. And then I'm going on for a little bit right now, but I got to make this point because it's like, so then I think that when we grow up and we almost kind of have that ingrained learning that when we get in trouble or when we're acting like a lunatic or when we're doing something wrong is when we get attention. And I think that that's where adults learn to be miserable, and going back to their childhood and acting like a child again isn't necessarily going to help them be more lively and playful and free unless they go back and they understand their childhood. So yeah.
Damn, you just totally sparked something in me, which if we think back to that example of the angry father in the minivan and yelling at his kids and stuff, what if at the psychological level, what was going on there is the father in that situation wanted to return. He didn't like having all these responsibilities on vacation. He wanted to return to his childhood self on vacation, where his parents had all of the responsibility. And so he regressed psychologically back to his childhood self, his emotionally immature self.
Ooh.
And,
Ooh.
and he
Ooh.
was playing that role, you see, but it was really his subconscious attempt to go back to the innocence of his own childhood.
That is incredible. I really, really like that. And I wonder if that's what happens to any old human on the planet. If they, I guess, are feeling free and happy, you know, and then because they're returning to their childhood self who's free and doesn't have many responsibilities, but just to laugh and relax and enjoy. But then when a problem comes up, you're still in that state of childhood mind, and something comes up and you're like, what's this? You know? So like, yeah. I really like that.
Like, it's almost like part of him wanted or was missing the comfort from his own parents and the attention that his parents used to give him when he was growing up and throwing tantrums. You see what I mean? Because what sparked it was when you said this phrase, where adults learn to be miserable is in childhood, getting attention from their parents when they're acting up. And so I wonder if that father in the situation was, if part of him was longing for that attention from his parents, for that. You see what I mean?
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. I definitely like the first thing you said a lot more. Maybe it's just because I don't entirely understand the second part like I do, but it's like his parents aren't there, so like
well, like, for instance, what if his parents passed away and emotionally he hasn't gotten over it? So at the subconscious level, he really misses them. He misses their attention, and he misses what his subconscious mistook for love was their attention during times of acting up.
I get that. I can get on board with that. Because I can definitely remember times where I wasn't talking to my family and I kind of acted up, and all I really wanted was a parent to come and be like, no, that's not the way to do things, you know? So I can completely see what you're saying. And I think that we can be really onto something here, because we've already stated that for adults to feel young and lively and free again, it's not necessarily going back to being a child. It's because I think that there are different levels of freedom as you grow up, because when you're it's almost learning how to be free as an adult. And I think that learning how to be free as an adult is making sure actually that you're not going back to that relaxed sort of no responsibility state, but going back to the state of freedom, but as a human. I mean, as an adult, because as adults, I think that freedom, I talk a lot about mental freedom, and I really like mental freedom. And it's the security within yourself to be able to roam freely in your mind. And when you're roaming freely in your mind, you're roaming freely in the world. And if you're a miserable adult, it's because you are terrified of roaming freely in your mind. And you still have this mindset that life should be easy and you can relax all the time, and you can fucking, I don't know, have no responsibilities. But that's not the answer, I think, to feeling young again. I think the answer to feeling young and lively like you were when you were a child is understanding what it means to feel, what it means to be lively and young and free as an adult. I think that is how you that's how you recapture that childlike free essence.
Well, yeah, that's so I think that's so true, so accurate. Learning how to be free as an adult and being secure in yourself. And I feel like somehow there's a degree of cynicism that most people associate with being an adult. Like, with the holidays being around us, we're going to see a lot of scenes from Christmas Carol, the Ebeneezer Scrooge movie, where, he's all greedy and he's all grumpy, right? And the whole point of the movie is how the ghosts of Christmas, past, present, and future, widen his perspective and cause him to become suddenly a little bit more free and giving and concerned about the welfare of others and how he treats others. And so it's it's a story of transformation, of self-transformation, I think. So I wonder, like, first of all, where does the grumpiness come from? Where does this jaded, grumpy adult, what would you call it? Stereotype, if you will. Where's the grumpy adult stereotype come from? And what was it about his transformation in the movie that made him so bubbly, cheerful at the end, where he's running through the streets saying, Merry Christmas, everybody, right? Almost like he's a kid again. Like, where do we pick up that grumpiness?
I'm telling you, I think that we pick up the grumpiness from not knowing how to be an adult. I don't think that anyone has ever learned how to be an adult. And when you fucking grow up, you're this miserable, grumpy ass adult because you don't know how to live your life. You don't know how to roam free in your mind. You don't know how to roam free in the world, and you become grumpy. But I think that when he visits like the past, the present, and the future, I mean, in the movie, I guess he shows them where he fucked up, in the past. He's like, you fucked up, and then he shows his present and he's like, you fucked up. And then he shows his future, and all the past fuck ups, his future is still a fuck up. And he dies alone and nobody comes to his fucking funeral because he wasn't a good human. And, they always say, nobody can love you until you love yourself, and you can't love anyone until you love yourself, right? So he obviously hated himself for not being able to be happy. He never knew how to be happy. He never knew just how to be happy when he was growing up. And I think that when he went through his past and his present and saw his future, that really woke his eyes up, and he's like, oh, well, I guess I kind of see what I need to do to be happy now. I don't think I went into that in deep enough detail because I couldn't find the words, but
I think I sort of follow you. I'm interested, how do people become free? How do they learn to roam free and become secure find that security in themselves?
They have to roam free in their mind. You have to be secure enough with yourself and know yourself deep enough to be able to roam as far as the sea goes in your mind. It's like, I remember a few times when I was younger and I would be on acid. And I remember this one time I was crying on the floor because these images going through my head were disrupting. And it was shrooms. I was on shrooms, but it was disrupting. And oh my God, it was horrible. But now that I think about it, number one, never did I question those thoughts. I thought that those thoughts were just me. I thought that those thoughts were a part of me, right? And then the second thing was I was in that small ass bubble in my mind. I couldn't venture off because I was terrified to venture off. What if I have a fucking heart attack? What if I die? What if venturing off in my mind means that I die? And I think that that's where a panic attack or an anxiety attack comes in. But I mean, that goes along with resistance, and you wind up resisting new pathways in your brain to stay in this old bubble. And eventually, if you keep resisting and you keep not going down these pathways, you become kind of like a shell and you become grumpy because there is nothing new in your life. There is nothing that brings ecstasy to your mind. You become this grumpy old fucking ball of just repeated fear. You're scared. You're scared because you're not secure with yourself and you don't know yourself. So to venture off from yourself and go into another thing scares the fuck out of you. So you got to learn to roam free in the mind.
The image of the shell kind of resonates with me. I feel like that's a good metaphor, that a lot of people have sort of shells up or shells around them, sort of like protective layers. And so does that come from being hurt in the past and then people not wanting to be hurt again, so they put up these protective layers?
Yeah, 100%, because we learn it. But once again, I don't think that we were ever taught really, and I don't mean this in a bad way because some people can have a large impact on your life, but like, it's more like, why were you hurt? Were you being a good person, or did you fucking hurt them and they hurt you back? Because if you hurt them and they hurt you back, then that's something that you can learn from and move past and be like, okay, well, how can I not be hurt again? How can I not hurt this person intentionally, so that way they don't hurt me? But then if that person hurt you and you knew that your heart was in the right place and that you really were not trying to hurt them, then that's not on you. That's on them. But we take that and we hold it so tight and we wrap ourselves up with it. But it's one fucking person. It's one person in the universe of millions and trillions of humans. So just because that one person was mean to you, it doesn't mean that if you open up to another person another day, that they won't treat you with kindness, respect, and love. And I think that's like where we straight up learn that shit. We weren't ever taught that one person's opinion doesn't really fucking matter. Yeah.
So well said. I think
Thanks.
that it kind of speaks to the importance of perspective. And I always, in my videos, I always like to bring up perspective because it does wonders for one's emotions to widen your perspective. And not only with, I mean, there's various perspectives. There's types, there's different types of perspective. You can have a time perspective of the next 5 minutes, or the current year. So anytime that someone says, I can't wait for 2020 to be over, 2020 is the year from hell, you have to look at the deeper layers behind what they're saying. The deeper layers is that it reveals that that statement has a time perspective of 1 year, right? But if you expand that time perspective to a decade or 2 decades or 3 decades, then you see that things are cyclical and that we're going to get out of 2020, and that every 10 years or so, we had 10 years ago, we had I graduated, 10 years ago in one of the worst economies ever. That was when the housing bubble burst, and a lot of people were not doing well financially. A lot of people lost their homes. Real estate investors. I remember watching this one show, my favorite show, The Prophet. This one guy who was a real estate investor, he had to open up a coffee shop because he lost so much money in his properties, in his house, the houses that he owned, right? Mm-hmm. But he had to reinvent himself. He had to shift. And I see the same thing happening these days where, okay, yes, restaurants are shut down because of Corona, and that's unfortunate. I wish that they didn't have to shut down. But at the same time, my mind jumps ahead 10 years from now, and I imagine myself having conversations with people 10 years from now who tell me, I say, how are you so successful in this thing that you're doing right now? And they tell me, well, you remember back to coronavirus? Well, I owned a couple of restaurants. They all went out of business because of Corona. So I took up my favorite pastime, which was making art or whatever. And I was able to sell a few art pieces, and it grew, it exploded. And here I am today. Mm-hmm. And so when I think that way, 2020 is not as big of a problem as it was prior for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I'm wondering if, as we get older, if we get bored because we don't have enough things to fill our mind with, and we think that our mind always has to be filled with things and problems because that's what we've learned from other adults. So that's why it's like people connect over coronavirus. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to go out today and I'm going to talk about how fucking bad coronavirus sucks. And then somebody is going to be on the same wavelength as me, and they're going to be like, oh, I fucking hate coronavirus too. And he's like, yeah, I gained a bunch of fucking weight, right? And then meanwhile, I'm over here in the same store listening to the same conversation. Of course I'm going to butt in. And I'm going to be like, yeah, but you didn't have to eat. You could have worked out. You could have painted. You could have read. You could have taken up a new hobby. Whatever y'all are feeling right now, that's on you. I wouldn't say it that meanly. I would definitely butter it up a little bit, so I don't hurt anybody's feelings or even scare them away from being a better person. But, so those people, I guess, they got bored because they had nothing to fill their mind with. So they took the most common thing to fill their mind with, which was hatred and fucking loathing. Pretty sure that's the same word, but for coronavirus, so I'm wondering if that came from their childhood, or if they learned it growing up, because they didn't learn how to be an adult. But I can't think, but I know that I can think of something, but I can't right now.
Yeah, I feel like something's starting to blossom there, an idea.
Yeah.
Almost how people's neuroses are just sort of rehashings of childhood patterns that at times were rewarded. And
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. It's like that common thing of being in trouble or being miserable so you get attention. The people who have that still same learned pattern connect with, the others who still have that same learned pattern. But like those who have broken out of that pattern, obviously they're not. But I definitely can now see, after you just said that, the connection between the childhood and the adult if it's not handled.
yeah, and in past episodes I've mentioned, or I've talked about the mind as a dog that you have to train. And it's kind of like, imagine you have a pet dog and you get it as a puppy and you have to train it, and you potty train it, you train it to do tricks, you train it to bark at intruders but be nice to the guests in the house, and all of these things. And then imagine one day you go on vacation and you have a dog sitter, and the dog sitter totally messes up your dog and rewards your dog for the wrong things, gives the dog a treat when they bark at family members, and
Mm-hmm.
all sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
And then you come back from vacation and suddenly your dog is all over the place in terms of their behavior, and you have to kind of train them again. And you're like, well, what gives? What's the reason for all of this odd behavior? But that's kind of how I think about myself, my own mind, and the minds of others, especially with psychology, when people are acting certain ways. I think, well, what was going on before I came here? What reward patterns were going on
Mm-hmm.
before I came into the room? And so if I'm analyzing myself and I'm watching my own behavior, then I would have to ask, well, what was I rewarded for in childhood? Or, how were these behaviors possibly rewarded years ago that I don't even remember?
Yeah. Yeah, I completely see that. I have to say, is this the last podcast of 2020 or do we have one more?
We should have one more,
One
because
more. Okay.
7 days from now will be the 30th. So that'll be
Oh, awesome.
2 days
Okay,
before
cool.
the new year.
Cool. So it's like I think it's the best when you meet people who kind of retrain your brain, right? Because it's like, say you have um say you're late very often, right? And all of your friends now, they're like, oh, well, he's always late, right? But you meet this super cool dude, and he's kind of where you want to be in life, and he invites you to lunch, and you're fucking 20 minutes late, and he looks at you and he's like, don't ever make me wait that long again. You know, automatically, in your mind, do not make this person wait. I won't make him wait because he doesn't like to be waiting. So when you meet new people, and not only are you training them how to treat you, but you're reprogramming their mind with the relationship between the two of you. And I think that that's awesome, because most of the time we go through our lives and we kind of just do the things that are, we think are okay. But then, like, when we meet somebody who retrains us as a dog, who retrains us, and then we kind of just start to change. We kind of just start to shift into a new human.
I love that. I love that message, because I think it shows the truth that relationships are dynamic, and that when you're interacting with somebody, I mean, it emphasizes the principle I believe in, that everything is in constant change, everything's temporary, everything's in a constant state of evolution. And that applies, and I think what you demonstrated by saying that is that it applies even to our relationships. Our relationships are not static and just, the same old thing week after week. But by holding each other accountable, by the systems of rewards, punishments that go on at a deep level psychologically, any two people in a relationship can evolve forward. They can become better versions of themselves. And that makes me feel good. That makes me think of like trees growing and plants flourishing and things like that.
Completely agreed. I agree with you.
Any final thoughts as we wrap up for today?
I think this was a really good episode. I think that, whoever is listening, if you didn't get much from this episode, bitch, go back. Because there's a lot in this episode. And then, as always, thank you so much for listening. And keep sending your topics in, because we loved that last one. We loved being able to help you, work through the issues in your mind. And yeah, follow me on Instagram at Try Tragedy.
Awesome. Yeah, I feel like a lot of truths came to the surface in this episode. Very pleased with that. So thanks for watching, everybody. And we'll see you soon next Wednesday for the last podcast of 2020.